Whiskey fam, sit down, grab a dram, and listen to the soothing sounds of your boy Whiskey One talk a little whiskey with you. Specifically some Widow Jane Decadence. Now I'm excited to get into this bottle. This is going to be a fresh cork pop here on camera. This is a blend of different bourbons from Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana. It's not revealed what the sources are, but most of you could probably figure it out, right? The big triumvirate of bourbon making. Now, this is also a Brooklyn, New York brand. For those of you guys who don't know much about Widow Jane, they typically use blends of bourbons, and they also make their ryes, but they use limestone as a method to kind of proof down their whiskeys. And in particular, this one is bottled at 91 proof. But before we get into this, I do want to do a quick shout out to all of my supporters, my Patreons. Thank you so much for continuing to support me. I know right now are kind of like unsettling times. There's a lot of change going on. So if I help either bring a smile to your faces or I help you escape a little bit, then we'll all be better for it. And I would certainly appreciate it by you guys commenting and let me know what you think of my videos. So I also want to do a quick shout out to a couple of people who have let me borrow some of their whiskeys lately. Quick shout out to Eric Anderson, Joseph San Nicholas, and also my brother Dennis. He's one of the first people to kind of get me into Widow Jane, and he did let me try this Decadence a while ago, but it's been so long that now I'm kind of like, oh man, what does it taste like? I don't remember, but it did have a sweet note to it. Now, about this bottle, it is, like I said, a blend of bourbons, but what they did was finish it in New York maple syrup barrels, essentially from, did I get this right? Yeah, Crown Maple. Now, I've actually had Crown Maple syrup. It's pretty good. I had no idea that it was like New York based or really what the relevance was, but once I looked at the label a little closer and saw the name, I'm like, yeah, that stuff's pretty good. So let's go ahead and get into this bottle, shall we? Cork pop. Ooh, yes sir. I'm gonna let that breathe a little bit. Let it breathe a little bit. Bottled at 91 proof for all you nerds, 45.5% ABV. There is no age statement on it. Again, being a blend, they're not really revealing much about what the overall age of this is or what the youngest whiskey that's in here is, but that's okay. We're really here to just sort of enjoy it, get into it, and I better do that now before I forget. So, I'd like to know how many of you guys watching have got into the Widow Jane 10-year. That seems to be like their flagship whiskey. I have a bottle of it, and I'm kind of curious like what a side-by-side would be on this. But, you know, this being like, you know, on the sweeter side from what I remember, this is really meant to be, you know, I guess like a variant, not necessarily a 10-year, but who knows? Maybe there is some 10-year whiskey in this. I don't know. Do you guys know? If you do, drop a comment down below. But let's check out the legs. First things first, that color is a nice burnished copper. And so far, wow, it's leaving a lot of oily gems along the glass. Certainly a good moderate viscosity, leaving a ton of raindrops, really, right there on there. But let's get into the nose. I get Kentucky bourbon funk, that's for sure. It's earthy. Has a deep cherry note to it. I do remember Widow Jane having that like a candy cherry. There's also a maple syrup. Who'd have thunk it? Yeah, some dark tea. Also a little Earl Grey tea. For those of you guys who don't know, it kind of has this citrus, earthy taste to it. And I notice a lot of bourbons kind of have that. Not all, but a lot do. Now, I'd really like to know, like, who is making this juice? I'm not, like, the biggest fan of seeing a label, sure it reveals like where it came from as far as like what state. And certainly some of us could probably pick it out, but I almost think like you'd have to be a whiskey nerd to know much about that. Meaning like you had quite a bit of different bourbons specifically from those locales, and you could probably pick out the notes, but you would have to really dissect that whiskey. And to me, I feel like why not just reveal it? Like, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like, is it important to you? I feel like it's important. I mean, why not? But as a blend, this is a straightforward bourbon. Sure, I get maple syrup, but there is a lot of bourbon out there that already has like a good caramel or maple syrup to it. Just kind of depending like who's making it. Some have a little bit more of a sweet spot, while others don't. Some are a lot more like spice racks. So far, I'm not really getting that. It's not quite the spice rack. I feel like it's gonna get you there, and it's sort of middle of the road, at least on the nose. So let's go ahead and have a sip. Cheers. Wow. Very approachable. I wouldn't peg it for a maple syrup finished whiskey. It's really not that sweet. So for those of you that are kind of like, well, you know, I don't like sweet whiskeys or whiskeys that are a little bit like sweet forward, it's not that. I wouldn't say that it's really anywhere near that. But as I let this sort of dance a little bit on the tongue and on the palate, the maple syrup starts to kind of shine a little bit more on the tail. So on the back end, not quite up front. So I'm gonna have one more sip. Okay, so Bardstown Bourbon. This feels like a good mix of Bardstown Bourbon. I honestly have no idea if it is Bardstown Bourbon, but it really reminds me of Bardstown Bourbon. It has a deep cherry note, very, very approachable, some good complexity. You get those tea notes, you know, you get the, you know, a little bit of a spice blend, but not overly spicy at all. Now I get a little bit of dark chocolate. It's really subtle though, and again, the maple syrup is what we're here for. Let's not fool ourselves, right? This is a maple syrup finished whiskey, so we are getting it because we want to have that maple syrup. And it's really not up front. Again, it's not up front. It's sort of lingering in the background, and you get it more on the tail. As far as like an overall finish, not a huge, big personality. As far as like a finish, I feel like it's a bit mild to moderate. Certainly letting you know it's there. The cinnamon starts to come out. The baking spices are a little bit muted, but what I really get is that dry cherry note and a lot more maple syrup now as I talk through this. But everything's sort of there, but not aggressive in any way. I feel like this is pretty balanced, you know, for a maple syrup finished whiskey. But I'm gonna take one more sip and give you my overall thoughts and impressions. So cheers again. Okay, those return sips are where the maple starts to reveal itself a little bit more. It speaks up a little bit as it hangs out at the party. When it shows up, it doesn't really say a whole lot. So I think of this as like an introvert whiskey. Just need to kind of like give it some time, warm up, let it warm up to you. And yeah, I think the maple syrup is there, but again, not very dominant. And I kind of like it for that. Now, overall thoughts and impressions, I would say that this is one of those whiskey curious whiskeys. You want to start with the Widow Jane 10-year. I feel like that's where you need to set your barometer, see if it's even for you, and then move on to the Decadence. I wouldn't recommend just jumping right into Decadence if you've never even had Widow Jane. Now, this is a good bottle. I don't want to mince words here. This is a solid whiskey. I think for what it is, it definitely delivers. It checks all the boxes.
100%.
And I did mention early on that I did think about perhaps doing a side-by-side, and let's do that. I got here a Widow Jane 10-year, wouldn't you know? And it's really close to proof, actually 91 proof. So it is at the same proof. I did pour it, let it breathe a little bit. Oh, and what did you know? I covered it with my little whiskey hat, or Glen hat. If you guys are into the channel or just would like to have this for your Glencairns to keep the bugs out or let your whiskey breathe a little bit without like all the vapor going out, hit me up. Drop me a message, email me if you want, and we'll send these out to you completely free. Now, if you did want a set of the copper, the metallic turquoise, and the black, it might cost you a couple fazools, but that's okay. We'll cover the cost of shipping. Just let me know if you're interested, because I really like these. I think they're kind of cool, especially as we get closer to the summer months. So let's get into this 10-year real quick. A lot more cherry. Wow, a lot more cherry forward. I feel like there's a lot more vanilla, dried fruits, so not just cherry. There's some orchard fruit medley going on there too. Less tea. More chocolate. So I'm gonna take a sip. Okay. I almost feel like there's more going on, honestly, with the 10-year. So I'm gonna go back to the Decadence. Okay. All right. So in my opinion, what's happening is the time sitting in that maple barrel helps to mute some of that personality from the Widow Jane. Now, if you want something a little on the sweet side, you want to have a dessert whiskey, I'm going to recommend the Decadence. However, I, again, will recommend that you get the 10-year Widow Jane first, and that way you can appreciate the nuances between the two. I'm not going to say, no, I don't recommend the Decadence. I actually do. But like I said, start with that 10-year first. And if you can get it for a good, reasonable price, like say 70 bucks, which is what I paid for it, I think it's well worth the money, certainly worth it. And I would recommend you getting it. But again, the Widow Jane is actually cheaper. So, you know, you get a little bit more complexity, more personality. There's more of a deeper discussion with the 10-year, in my opinion. And this one just feels like, hey, let's just have a dessert. Let's not think too much about it, and it'll get you there. All right, guys. So thank you all for watching. Love to see you guys support. So if you are new to the channel, consider subscribing. You can also check us out at whiskeyonechannel.com. We do have our Chart and True newsletter. I have been writing more articles and testing out my writer's chops a little bit. And if there's anything I should probably point out is maybe the Widow Jane 10-year tastes so much better because it is in a Whiskey One Glencairn. I don't know. Maybe that's it. All right, guys. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for checking us out. And remember, here at Whiskey One, it's about the one you enjoy. Cheers.